Job chapter 42. Let's call this one Green Destiny. And hopefully why will be clear by the end of the chapter, in which Job is going to start out by saying, to God, I know that you can do all things. And a little later on, he's going to say, I have heard about you, but now I have seen you with my eyes, which is an odd statement to make, understanding that the text describes God as speaking to Job from the whirlwind. And so even if his physical eyes cannot see God, understanding that the word describes in other places the consequences of literally looking at God, that being death. There are times in which God has made himself known or appeared to people without them having to die. And so whether or not Job saw God with his physical eyes, he is seeing God more clearly, having now had an encounter with God, where even if his specific questions weren't answered, he has now been exposed to a reality much larger than what he might have originally expected. And for that reason, it seems like he is going to go on to say, now that I have seen you, I despise myself and I repent. But God, having spent most of the last 4 chapters helping Job to see in very stern terms some of the things he's overlooked, now that Job has probably gone too far in his criticism and questioning of God, God is not here to condemn him. As a matter of fact, God is going to turn to Eliphaz and his 2 friends, as the chapter is going to describe them, and say that his anger burns against them because they did not speak accurately of God the way that his servant Job did. And if you think it's a mistake, God's going to say that again, as God is going to tell them to go to Job and bring an offering to offer up for themselves. And Job is going to pray for them. And after Job prays for them, God accepts the prayer and then restores Job's fortunes, giving him twice as much as he had before, as the chapter goes on to describe the way in which all who knew Job came to him and comforted him at this point. Before the chapter goes on to close by describing the way in which the blessings that God gave Job in his latter years far exceeded those of his former years. And as we have mentioned in previous chapters, this final chapter of Job brings full circle the way in which God allows Satan to put a blameless man under the kind of pressure that exposes some otherwise invisible character flaws. But he does not use that as the opportunity to focus on what Job was doing wrong. Because even though he spent roughly 4 chapters exposing Job's mistakes, here in the final chapter, at the end of the matter, he chooses to focus on that which Job had right. Which reminded me of a passage in the book of Hebrews, the 12th chapter, round about verse 23, when it's describing the assembly to which those who follow Christ have been called, where it's going to say, to the assembly of the firstborn whose names have been written in heaven, to a judge who is God of all, to the spirits of righteous people made perfect. And what that also reminded me of was the way in which this chapter brought to mind the movie Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, where the hero, Li Mu Bai, was at his best with a sword called the Green Destiny, which seemed to be a great parallel for this chapter, because not only has God put a green light on the blessings ahead for Job, the Green Destiny was a sword that in the hands of an average soldier might not be a whole lot, but in the hands of a hero, it was borderline magic. And so in this situation where the book of Hebrews is describing the degree to which righteous men are made perfect, it seemed to be a great fit with the book of Job, where a blameless man is being perfected through misfortunes brought to him by the enemy. And likewise, we mentioned it in our discussions of the book of Job here, that it's one thing to be able to afford a home, but it's another thing to be able to afford a home that you can take care of. And part of maturity is realizing the difference between a home I can buy and a home that I can actually care for in a way that, God willing, increases its value, or at least puts me in the best position I can to take care of it and increase its value. And so likewise, it's one thing for me to be a soldier who would want a sword like the Green Destiny if I were in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. But the question remains, am I the kind of hero that can use it the right way? And so as we look at the end of the book of Job, we quite possibly might be watching the way in which God takes a blameless man and uses even unjust circumstances to perfect him into a hero. capable of handling the responsibilities that go along with the immense blessings ahead. And so my prayer for you is my prayer for me, that even if God never perfects us to the point where anyone would describe us as a hero here on this earth, that we at least live the kind of lives that would motivate God to turn the injustices against us into greater wins than we could ever really imagine.